Welcome. So today, it's about against all odds. Look, if you went into what is it, the casino, whatever the casino, and the odds are against you. You know the odds are against you in a casino, right? But you could have the victory in there. You would just go in and like clean house and put them out of business. They don't build those big businesses because they give away their money, right? Kind of like the lottery. The lottery runs because they aren't giving it all away. Oh my gosh. But God, through his son, has given everything to give us life. Bonnie, good morning. And LSB, good morning. Welcome. That would be Michael. Michael Bretz. Good morning. Or Betts, is it? Okay, against all odds, how does the victory come? I'm FC Farwell. I'm a minister. And when we go on this scope trip, this broadcast, we go in deep waters because we are out for a big catch with our Father. Sing, Susanna, good morning. A lot of new people here, or at least I haven't seen you that often, so thank you for stopping in for a day. Hang around a little bit, have your coffee, tea, whatever you do, and see if there's a word here that might impact your life to lift you to your destiny. Okay? So, are you having trouble with your account there, David? I know these things glitch and do all kinds of things. Well, we got it. We get going. Thank you for the hearts. Thank you for the shares. Thank you for living life. So, it's one thing to know about something, isn't it? It's one thing to know about something. It's another to teach it. And it's yet another thing to live it. It's one thing to know it. It's another to teach it. It's another to live it. Now, my wife Adita, she says this morning we could get an ice storm. Bev, nice to see you here. So, and thanks for that share, Charlotte, and the others of you that shared. So we're supposed to get an ice storm Sunday, or we could get an ice storm. Now, sometimes when we get an ice storm, it's pretty bad. Now, for those of you in Florida, you're going, yeah, or Southern Texas, Cal, you go, well, we don't have it so bad here. But you know what? Hey, if the electric goes out, because this is where I'm going, I can always put my food in the refrigerator outside. I got a built-in fridge right outside. See the good? So my wife is asking me, do we have a generator? Yes, I have a little generator. And I'm like, okay, I'll get some gas today so we have it in case we need it. So it's one thing to know about something. It's another to teach it, but it's the real thing to live it. Heather, good morning. Welcome. Thank you for stopping in. We have got to go. Think about this. We have got to go farther with our God. We do. We each individually need to go farther with our God so that we can take others further with him. We can lead others. Look, people are looking for a leader. Look at teenagers. Why do they join gangs? Why do they get involved in these groups? Sometimes to their detriment. It's because they're looking for someone who can lead them in a good way. But the thing is, because our eyes are so dull, sometimes our hearing dull and eyes aren't seeing clearly, we walk right into traps. So that's why we need to, against all odds, have the victory. We need to know something. We need to have wisdom, understanding, right? With all your wisdom, get understanding. We need to do it to the extent we teach it, and then we need to live it, which means we need to show it, right? If we can just know there's truth out there, we don't go very far. If we just teach the truth, we've made another step. But if we can live it, we can lead people to promised land with God, right? We can take them in the promised land. So the thing is I have, and this kind of ties in a little to yesterday as I go into a new place today, is how are we seeing? How are we perceiving life? Because we've considered it, people are blind. People are blind. They see, but they're blind. How do we know? Because they do not see the light of truth that gives them the liberty to walk in the freedom as the sons and daughters of God. They don't. Yeah. Thanks for coming in. Oh my gosh, right? So they're not seeing, but they're in bondage. Light frees because light makes known where we're at and can show us our path, where we're going. In other words, it parts wisdom and understanding. Truth is light. So, and it brings us to a place of liberty, because it's like this. If you go into your house and you open the door and there's a tiger in there. Lavon, good morning. If you go into your house and there's a tiger in there, or what are those big snakes? Pythons. There's some pythons. You know how people, do you know how they respond? Usually they turn off the light. They do. They turn off the light because they don't want to deal with it. So good to have you here, Levant, and each of you. So they turn off the light and they don't deal with the things that could set their life free. In other words, people would rather choose so often to be in captivity than to have the life-freeing truth that launches them into their destiny with the Father. So we cannot, as we are seeing people wander aimlessly, and we want them to walk into the glorious manifestation of the sons of God, walk who they are, we need to reveal light to them so that the blind can see light. The question is, if we're going to set people free with light, will we be a light? Will we be a light to others in our word, which we share, our teaching, our sharing, and will we take time to father people? In other words, father, mother, will we help raise them up? Are we just throwing biscuits of truth to people? You feed your dog biscuits or something. Are we feeding people biscuits of truth, or are we giving them the whole kit and caboodle? It would be said like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But if the fishing thing, remember that one? You can feed that person to fish, but if you show them how to fish, you take care of them for a lifetime. We need to be ones who learn how to fish so we can show others how to fish the deep things of God. Okay, so will we be the light? Now people are hearing. Yes, yeah, endeavor, you just go shine. We just go shine. So how are we hearing? We talked about seeing. Jesus said, take heed what you hear. What are you hearing? How are you hearing it? What way are you hearing the things you're hearing? He didn't say that so he would leave us in the same place we were, but we would be lifted to something really incredible and valuable in life. So are we coming in when we approach God? Okay, we are with him, seated in the heavenlies, right hand, Christ in us, all that, all these good things. And it says we're changed from glory to glory into that same image that Christ is. The truth of the matter is, with the Christ in us, we are created in the same image that Christ is. The same rights, privileges, responsibilities to carry out kingdom work as Christ. We are. When God did it, it's a complete work. It wasn't partial work. Now, so what are we hearing? When we hear, are we leaving the same way we came? Yeah, they're saying now just pray or heal them. God will give the increase. That is part of it. There's no doubt that Jesus said part, but it's part. Because he said, preach the kingdom and heal the sick therein. And he also said, or heal the sick and then preach the kingdom. The thing is, we want people drawn by God because he's the one that draws. If we could do all the work trying to draw people into the great things of God, and it's like we get nowhere. Look, I spent years trying to evangelize, and I'm not really an evangelist, right? I haven't really walked in that. Now, I told Timothy to do the work of evangelist, so I think we all need to become better evangelists, in that sense of that we can reach people. But it really wasn't until I started walking more in the signs and miracles and things like that and releasing kingdom life that I started seeing I was able to draw people in because they were drawn in by the love that God was showing them, the care for his life. So a much greater impact when we carry the fullness of the kingdom, right? Because what is it, 2 Corinthians 4:2 or somewhere? It's probably not where it is. The kingdom is not in word only, but in power. And so if we just pray, that's part. And we need prayer warriors. We need intercessors. That's a vital ministry function. But if all we do is get in our prayer closet and pray, and that's all we do, who's going to reach the lost? He never told us in Romans 10 and Isaiah and so other places that you'll pray and people come to the kingdom. It does. It is a key to opening that door. But we need the light bearers who go forth and speak it. Jesus didn't stay in Peter's house with his mother after he was healed. And I'm just going to hang out here and pray that God's word will move. No, they went forth and ministered. So how are we seeing? How are we hearing? Are we carrying the same fears and bondage we have in the past, or have we broken that off? Have we seen it broken off of us? Now, there's an interesting record. I have toward the end, I'm going to tell you some mind-blowing accounts that maybe you've never heard. I've got a couple miracle ministry accounts that I want to share with you, but that's going to be at the end. So let's get into a little more meat of the word, right? We say the meat of the word. Matthew 15:23 through 27. And behold, a Canaanite woman. Now, she's not a Judean, right? She's not a Jew. She's outside the realm of like, we really don't want a lot to do with that person. I don't know what group of people you may have considered you don't want to deal with, but we all have to deal with those things. Put on the mind of Christ and love people, right? There's no Jew, no Greek, there's no difference. There's no separation in the kingdom of God. So this Canaanite woman comes out from that area and says, "Have mercy on me, Lord. Have compassion, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." She's not oppressed by a demon. She's severely oppressed by a demon. In other words, this demon is manifesting things that are not of light and not of the kingdom, right? Not of God's kingdom anyway. So, but Jesus did not answer her a word. He kept his mouth zipped. And his disciples came and begged on him, saying, well, you can think what you want to think, but I know, when you see blind eyes open, deaf ears open, the mute speak, cripples get out of wheelchairs and walk, you tell me who the power is. I'll tell you, it's the Lord Jesus from heaven that God has sent that is setting captives free. You can be blind and you can be deaf, but you can hear and see, and it's a choice. Just because you see with your eyes and hear with your ears doesn't mean you're hearing or seeing truth and that you are still in captivity. So send her away, for she's crying out after us. Look, hey, I need help here. He answered, I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Look, I know my mission. I'm Jesus, right? Jesus. I know my mission. I am sent to the lost children, the people, the sheep of the house of Israel. So I'm sorry, you're outside of God's plan, and I'm not going to step into that place. But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. He answered, it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. This daughter is, contact me. Why don't you contact me and find out? Or why don't you? The answers are there if you want them. The answers are there, or we could stay in a garbage can with the lid on it and lights all around us, but we've never taken the lid off to see it. How come he's raising the dead, hundreds from the dead around the world? How come they're getting saved and getting new miracle life? Let me answer that one for me, and I can answer your question. Why is God doing miraculous signs and wonders? And then you can know what's available to us. So this is coming up, those of you on Facebook Live, questions coming up on Periscope. So he answered, it is not right to take the children's bread, and throw it to the dogs. So in Jesus' perspective, the children's bread is healing. They have a right to healing. But are we hearing, are we seeing, are we perceiving and receiving? And we've covered this in other scopes, why people are not healed, haven't we? Are we receiving, digesting, and manifesting truth? Or are we believing a lie and the circumstances that are not telling us the truth? So it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now think about this. This is Jesus' perspective. Doesn't mean it's God's perspective. It's Jesus' perspective. I'm sorry, you're outside of God's plan, and I'm not offering anything to you. That's what Jesus' thought are. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. This is what he's speaking. Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And we know from the Aramaic, it's the puppies. In their culture, as far as we understand, the dogs were outside, but the puppies got to come inside and eat the crumbs. So even these puppies, and you say dogs, that's fine. Even the puppies come in and they get to enjoy the crumbs off the table. And so look at this. I have nothing to do with you, Jesus is saying. The disciples, the followers with him, they don't want nothing to do with her, if you go back in the record. But she is persisting. And she's saying, look, even they get crumbs off the table. All I want, just give me a speck, give me a crumb. That's all I'm asking for. And what does he say? What does he say? God had to give his son a new perspective, and he had to grow into something greater. We each have the privilege of growing into something greater. What are we hearing? What are we seeing? What are we perceiving? And what are we walking in? So Jesus said, answered to her, said, "O woman, great is your faith." You're blowing my paradigm, Jesus is saying, right? You're taking me from where I was thinking to something greater. We should be walking out in life and taking people to something greater because we should be seeing and hearing greater. So, great is your faith, let it be as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that hour. And we know from the old English and all that it was like, that moment she was healed right away. Remember, he reaches down for Peter, pulls him out of the water. When he calms the storm, it calms. It didn't take an hour, those kind of things. The key. So I'm going to give you a key today. Here's a key. Take the key, okay? Take the key. The key to kingdom living is learning how to flip the switch. You flip a switch on the wall. Flip the switch in our own thinking so that our lives match what God has already promised us. It's not just that we get our thinking in alignment with God, we get our lives in harmony, in tune with our Father. This is the result of seeing and hearing the truth that is released that takes us from the dark places. So we're so accustomed. You think about this, family, children, husbands, wives, work people. We are so accustomed to seeing ourselves as we are in the world. But in Christ, there's new perceptions, there's new understandings, there's new perspectives, new rules apply. And that is the key to kingdom living, is learning to flip the switch in our own thinking so that our hearts and lives match what God has already promised us. So when you read like Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, he says, this is what you were taught, but this is what I say. This is what you have known, but this is the new way. Make sense? In other words, he's saying, yeah, you understood it this way, but this is the truth of what I want to show you. Alicia, good morning. Welcome on FB Live. I understand you have a minute, drop in. So when we read that he's changing us, he's taking our paradigm, he's taking the way we were hearing and thinking and saying, I have a new way for you to hear and think so that you walk in kingdom abundance. He addresses what we've been taught, the way we've lived according to the world's and religious standards. He confronts our beliefs and he's saying, well, this is not really what I said, but this is what I say. Let me introduce you to how the kingdom really works. And again, thank you for those hearts and shares and all that. I appreciate that. For many of us, maybe you should just say all of us. But I can't speak for you. I'll say for me. So for me, I'm still in the process of making that switch. There's not all areas of my life that have switched. Bonnie, good morning. We are learning and unlearning, right? Replacing what we formerly thought, the way we process things, the way we went through things, with the reality of kingdom life. Robert, welcome on FB Live. I guess Periscope's having issues. Okay. God's property. God's property. I've done a sharing on this somewhere. God's property. God has given you boundaries of what is yours. You can rightfully claim and walk out. But have you ever seen a yard? Have you ever seen a yard where someone drove up and did tire marks in their yard, tore it up? You ever seen a yard torn up by tire marks? Probably have, right? Are we letting the enemy come into God's property and mark up the property that God has given us? Are we? Are we carrying thoughts in our hearts that God does not have in his heart for us? So we can't afford to have thoughts in our heart that God doesn't have in his heart for us. What we formerly thought may be true may not be the truth of the kingdom, and therefore we need a greater vision. We don't want the enemy treading on our lives, God's property. and mar it. We don't want the buildings of the building of the word and life that God has in us to be in disrepair and torn down. So, Abraham, before I get into these accounts, Abraham, it says in Romans 4:18, against hope, he believed in hope. In other words, when everything looked doubtful, everything looked like no way it could work out, there's no chance of this working the way God says it will. He says against hope, he believed in hope. Yes, he opens our understanding, as Alicia's saying, so that the enemy doesn't put marks on our property, but we are marked by who we are in Christ. So he against hope, believed in hope that he should become the father of many nations. As he has been told, so shall your offspring be. Now listen, he did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body. This is a correct translating of this verse. There are versions of the Bible, like the King James and some of the older ones, New King James, I think, that say that he didn't weaken in faith and he didn't consider his body. But the second "not" is not in the text. It isn't when you look at the Greeks, how the Greek text were. So he did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body. So that means he didn't consider his circumstances greater than God's promise. Jesus did not consider his circumstances greater than Abraham. I said Jesus, I think. Abraham did not consider his circumstances greater than the promise of God. He considered the promise of God greater than his circumstances. Okay, I think I got that out the way I wanted. So he did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead. He could produce no live seed for a child when he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb. No unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God. In other words, no doubt, no worry, or no fear entered in or remained that made him waver concerning the promise of God. He was fully convinced, fully persuaded that what God had promised he was able to do. He was able to do what he promised. We have the privilege of coming to the place that we become so fully persuaded, we're persuaded fully in what Dr. Nicole Smith, good morning, of what our God has said and done and provided for us, that no matter what my circumstances say, it won't matter because my God will come through. Look, you come to the Red Sea. We drown if we cross the Red Sea. Did God make a way for the children of Israel, those who were servants, not sons and daughters of God? Can God do less for his children than he did for the servants in the Old Testament? Does that make sense? Can God do less? That's a question. Can God do less for his children than he did for his servants in the Old Testament? How could he? Hebrews, we're under a greater promise, right? It says, Hebrews, we have greater promises with a better covenant, with a better mediator. Yes, no, I mean, y'all are speaking right here. You should be right here going, saying, no way, right? No way. This is not the one-way sign. This is the no-way sign. God cannot do less when we're under better promises, with a better covenant, with a better mediator. In other words, at least he has to do the same. And really the reality of it is, will he not do more? Jesus operated under an old covenant, right? It is finished. He completed it. Pentecost came, the new covenant comes. Because you can't have a covenant without the shedding of blood. It was the shedding of the blood of Christ that brought about the new covenant. So he could even say, because he knew what was coming was greater than even what he had access to, he said, we will do greater works than he did. Same works and greater, because he knew his sinless blood offering would bring something greater to us, with him living in us and him seated at the right hand of the Father. Where are you seated? Right hand of the Father. Hebrews 11:12. Therefore, from one man, him as good as dead, were born descendants. He was good. His body could not produce live seed to have a child. So in him as good as dead, Abraham, were born descendants as many of the stars of heaven and as many as innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. In other words, from a person that was dead, God spoke that there would be life. And in agreement, Abraham is like spoken to, what is that? You speak into being that which is not as though it were. You got it? We say life come, we say freedom come, we say truth come, love come, right? Love has come. So what we say is not what we see or hear in the world. We say and we hear and say what God says is our reality. Hebrews, go down to verse 17 in Hebrews 11. So by faith, Abraham, by believing, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac, and whom he had received the promises, and was in the act of offering up his only son. He was in the act. Isaac was the promised son, right? Right? The promised son. One from the deadness of Sarah and Abraham. Life come. But it took like 20 years, about 20 years, Antoinette and others, good morning. It took about 20 years for him to get to the point that it settled in his heart. Because remember, Sarah goes, why don't you go with your handmaid? He have a little relationship with her, and with Hagar. Oh my gosh, what am I thinking today? Anyway, you know what I mean. God's great morning to you, Antoinette. So he produced a child, but wasn't the promised one. No, because he tried to do it in his own ability. Look, consider, think, and the things you're doing to life today, right now, how much of it is in your ability and how much is it in God's ability? How much are you walking out the way you think you can make it work, or how God says it will work? It'll make all the difference between walking in power and freedom and the glorious liberty of the children of God, or walking in bondage. You try to do it your way, it breaks down, it decays. You do it God's way, life comes. Look, born descendants from Abraham, as many of the stars of heaven and as many as innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. That's what God can do in your life when you trust him and nothing else. So he offered up Isaac. Through Isaac, so your offspring be, your lineage. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, Isaac, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. In other words, in a figure. So the truth is that Abraham said, yes, God, whatever. God says give up his son. God provides the ram as a substitute. But he had that much trust in God, he was willing to take it to the limit, because he believed that God would even raise Isaac from the dead. Now, we believe, in a figure for us, we believe that God raised Jesus from the dead. So he believed in a way of what the Messiah that would come and what would be available. So I want to share some accounts to you. Now, if you want, I don't know, I may post this on my timeline on Facebook, or may not, and get a hold of me, my contacts in here. So I was watching last night David Hogan. I'm going to talk about R.W. Shambach and A.A. Allen, which goes back a few years, and David Hogan a little here. So he's telling these stories, and the persecution is so bad in Mexico. So the persecution, so you got the teaching, so if you're good, have a great day. If you want to hear the stories, cool. So persecution is so bad down there sometimes in Mexico. I mean, you just go out and they shoot you, right? They take you. It doesn't matter. You just look at them the wrong way and you're an infidel or something. So what they had to do is they started having to do their Bible fellowships, their meetings, their church meetings in secret. What that means is they did not announce a location. It might leak out. They didn't tell what day it would be, and they didn't tell what time it would be. Now, wait a minute. You got your church bulletin, right? And it says on Sunday at this time we're going to meet, right? Well, here's how their church works. You don't know the location. You don't know the time, the day, and you don't know the time. So how are you going to meet? They have to hear God's voice of when and where to meet. Yeah, and you know what? And God is faithful to tell them, the fellowship is today, it's at 3:00, and this is where it is. So this lady, She hears God speak. She's not a believer, not a believer. She hears, go to this place at this time and ask for pastor. Now, she thinks pastor is a certain person, right? So she goes to the voice she heard. She comes and she says, I'm here to see pastor, because she thinks it's a person instead of the title. I'm here to see pastor because I had a voice come and tell me go, right? How many of us will hear God's voice and will go? So she arrives, she comes. Well, you know what happens? She becomes born again of God's Spirit. She receives Christ in her. Now she sits on the floor, the concrete or whatever, for like 2 days just in communion with God, not eating or anything. And then she gets the voice comes again, says, I've heard the voice again. I'm supposed to go see my grandson, which is like a 10-hour bus ride or something, pretty far away. So she goes to see her grandson. Now, the amazing story about her grandson is that he was born without bone mass. They even explain it like he didn't have a skeletal structure. So he wasn't supposed to live, but here he is about 8 years old. He's about 8 years old, but he's in bed all his life because he can't get up and move because he has no bone structure. So, and whatever other issues, right? Whatever other issues are going on. So, she gets there, and then David Hogan somehow, I don't know how this all connected, brought him, he went there, whatever. But he gets there, and this grandchild that has no bone structure for 8 years is laid in bed, cannot get up and do anything, has to be fed, taken care of, washed, everything. He's up on the bed, jumping up and down. He's up on the bed, jumping up and down. So David Hogan asked him, he goes, and again, I have these videos if you want to see them or something. So David comes in and says, what happened? And he says something like, right, Robert? So he says something like, I wish I could remember. Maybe if Patty or Robert, if you saw it at the end of that video, he says, the man of light came. I don't know how else he said it. The man of light came. I saw him descend through the ceiling, and he healed me. Well, how did he do that? David's like, how did he do that? He says, what did he look like? He says, I know what Jesus looks like. He says his hair was white, and he had on a dress, he would say, but it's a robe, but he didn't know what a robe was. This kid didn't know what a robe is. And this is recent. This is very recent, and it's in the news. You can find it. So a robe of white. He's got, you need to send me an email or whatever. I'll post it, okay? They're on YouTube. They're on YouTube. So he had a belt that he wore that was like gold, yellow. It was like gold. His eyes were like fire. His feet were, as I understand, like fire. And he looks at the boy. Jesus, okay, descends through the ceiling, comes in the room, looks at him, touches him, and immediately he felt bone structure come in his body. Yes, bone structure come in his body. And totally healed. So the grandmother walks in the room. He's leaping and jumping on the bed, totally healed. Has this incredible story how Jesus came and healed him. Right? Right. Okay, let me tell you. And that's a recent one. I'm going to go back a few years. R.W. Shambach, who was a minister, 50s, 60s, whatever. He, had some great miracles and things in his life. Now he tells he was asked, what is the greatest miracle you have ever seen? He says, the one with A.A. Allen. Now there's videos of A.A. Allen and R.W. Shambach on YouTube. So, and you can find this. It's, I thought I wrote down the title, but it's like, here. Well, the one title is Miracles, Miracles, Miracles. God Working Through David Hogan, the 8th, something like 8, 2016. So August 2016. Miracles, Miracles, Miracles. The other one is R.W. Shambach and something like the greatest miracle I ever saw. I'll have to get it. But anyway. So what happens is this lady had a child. This lady had a child, and it was born with 26 diseases. They said 26 diseases. His arms were deformed in his chest. His tongue just hung out of his mouth. He couldn't hear. He couldn't see. He just had like whites, no pupils, couldn't see. He had no feet. No feet. Okay? None. No feet. And other things. I haven't even said it all. So here he is, just like a fetus kid. I don't know what to call it. In a fetus position, just pretty much the dead among the living, right? The dead among the living. That might be a good way to describe it. So what happens is this lady has come into these meetings for 1 week that are happening that A.A. Allen's doing. Comes to these meetings for 1 week, and she's just, is the man of God going to pray for my child? That was all she was concerned about. And she had spent all her living. Remember the woman with the issue of blood? She got on the airplane or whatever, the bus or the airplane, got there, food, the hotel. She had only $20 left, $20 left. And she asked R.W. Schambach, will the man of God pray for me? And he was like, if he doesn't pray for you, I will personally take you to his trailer, because they lived in trailers then when they were traveling, and I will personally take you to him to pray for him. So that night, A.A. Allen says, I want to take an offering of faith. He says, if you give what you have to give, that's not a big deal, because you have it like an abundance. You have an extra to give. He says, I'm asking for an offering of faith where you actually give out of something you don't have to give. You give something you don't have to give. Well, that lady with the last $20, $5 of it was for the bus trip back or whatever, $15 was to see the doctor again. So, you know what? When he made that offering, she was the first woman or the first person up and put in. And R.W. Schambach says he goes down, walks in front of the stage. Now, I'm not magnifying a person here, because God has put Christ in you and magnified his word above all his name. And what I'm saying is we can do the same things. We are to do the same things. And you've heard some of my accounts. I'm not sharing any of my accounts, but I've shared some. And we're seeing greater works every day. So she puts this in, and R.W. Schambach goes down off the stage and looks, and she put in her $20. She put in all of her living, right? So he's up there. When he sees that, R.W. Schambach goes backstage and is bawling to the Lord. He's got, God, he's calling out to God. God, you got to do something for this woman. So our A.A. Allen, who got a lot of visions, he gets a vision of a building. And he realizes it's a hospital. And then he's telling this in the teaching, right? He's in his teaching. So I see this child, and I see like 5 doctors around him. And his child has 26 diseases, like that nothing can be done for. He's not going to survive, right? This woman has brought the child to this meeting. She's been there like a week with him. Puts in her last $20, right? So he's having this vision, a hospital, 26 diseases, and he goes, I see you driving somewhere. Oh, you're driving here. You're here tonight. God's going to heal your child. Put some joy in your life. So she brings the child up, puts him in his arms, and what happens? I mean, the story's there. You can hear it. I'm telling you. Feet appeared. The bones in his body grew out to normal. His tongue snapped in his mouth and he was whole. His ears were opened. He had new eyes with pupils. I'm telling you, God healed all 26 diseases of that child. That woman left rejoicing. Now, the other part of it was, it released a working of so many other mighty miracles that night because people's faith rose. And that's our subject today, about faith, the faith of Abraham. Do we have the kind of believing, the kind of faith that though everything speaks against it, we have one word from God that speaks for it, and we walk in that one word and we see the victory? So people came up to her. First person comes up and gives her like an envelope, and it's got $20 in it, but in line form, and she left with more than she came with. Oh, you lost me. I'm sorry. Well, I'll put the link up, whatever, or I'll send it to you, that God is able. All you need is one promise from God over the 1,000 lies of the world, and you can walk victoriously, trusting, believing, having confidence in God. One promise defeats every negative, every doubt, every fear, every worry. Yes. So, yeah, we need to have a heart that repents. That's so true. We need to have repentant hearts. In other words, God, I believed what the world was saying. You told me to believe this, so I'm going to speak that which is as though it doesn't appear it's that way. I'm going to speak the reality of what you say is true and not what I'm seeing and I'm hearing. So anyway, I'll link those up. I'll get them put up. I'll put 2 links on my Facebook page, FC space Farwell. And I want you to know the victory is yours. You only need one promise from God to defeat every lie of the enemy. You need to stand on the marked off property that was purchased. You were purchased by Christ's blood, and not let the enemy come in and put tire tracks on your spiritual property. Don't let your buildings be dilapidated. Dilapidated? Yeah, I'm trying for that word and I'm failing. Don't let them be falling down. Let your life be lifted in vision and purpose, so that you know that against all odds, the victory will come for you. I love you. Have an incredible day.